was given is that Rock Christian Kabore should be released unconditionally, and of course a shorter timeline should be given for the country's transition to interim presidents and to civilian presidency. Okay, one of those conditions has been fulfilled right now, as Rock Mark Christian Kabore has been released, and we look forward to other conditions given to Burkina Faso being met. Okay, still in the African continent, this time around in the southern part of the continent, South Africa precisely, as Cyril Ramaphosa actually puts an end to COVID restrictions after over 2 years of imposing those restrictions on the South African citizens and nationals and of course occupants. Yeah, South Africa has announced the ending of COVID restrictions 2 years after they were imposed. Yeah, in a televised address, President Cyril Ramaphosa said that the national state of disaster actually would end at midnight on Monday. Masks will still be required for indoors after for another month. Although the pandemic was not over, he was confident that there were only better times ahead. And South Africa has actually recorded far more coronavirus cases than any other African country, accounting for almost a third of infections across the continent. Okay, cutting the long story short, let's take a quick trip to South Africa right now and get to listen to the president of the country, President Cyril Ramaphosa, coming out to announce the end to the various restrictions that has been imposed as a result of COVID-19.
Since the requirement for a national state of disaster to be declared in terms of the Disaster Management Act are no longer met, Cabinet has decided to terminate the national state of disaster with effect from midnight tonight. What this means is that all regulations and directions made in terms of the Disaster Management Act following the declaration of the national state of disaster in response to COVID-19 are repealed, meaning done away with effect from midnight tonight, with the exception of a few transitional measures. We will still be required to wear a face mask in an indoor public space. This is necessary to prevent transmission.
Yeah, initially I was rejoicing at, Abolade Sodiq actually, ending on the dot of 2:14, thereby giving me, enough time to have the full complement of my 45 minutes on the show. But as break for me, as information just reaching me right now, Abdurazak Yusuf just announced to me that my time on the show will be cut short. Unfortunately, I have to try as much as possible to round things up very quickly, and my 45 minutes was actually cut to another by 10 minutes actually. Well, and this is not the time to wail on the show. I try as much as possible to make judicious use of the time that I've been given on the show today. Yeah, moving forward quickly, we've been talking about Ethiopia and the humanitarian truce that was declared in Ethiopia about 3 weeks ago right now. And of course, I came back, last week to tell you about, the Tigrayan rebels actually coming back to accuse the Ethiopian government of, the truce being a fallacy, because the roads that should be opened for humanitarian aids to actually reach the Tigrayan region are still blocked. And as a result of that, aids in which they initially declared the truce for is not getting to that particular country. Okay, and because of my time, I would have loved to go back and try as much as possible to play excerpts from the representative of the Tigrayan rebel back last week to help you understand why the truce is actually a fallacy. But we've got development and some couple of reports from Ethiopia once again, as two leading human rights group on Wednesday actually accused armed forces of the Ethiopian Amhara region of waging a campaign of ethnic cleansing against ethnic Tigrayans during a war that has killed thousands of civilians and displaced more than 1 million. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch said in a joint report that abuses by Amhara officials and regional special forces and militia during fighting in Western Tigray amounted to war crimes and crimes against humanity. They also accused Ethiopia's military of being complicit in those acts. Since November 2020, Amhara officials and security forces have engaged in a relentless campaign of ethnic cleansing to force Tigrayans in the Western Tigray from their home, said Kenneth Roth, Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. Well, we've been hearing different reports of what's going on in the Tigrayan region, and of course, reports from the Ethiopian Civil War. And we've been hearing reports of ethnic cleansing and war crimes being committed by the Ethiopian armed forces. But this time around, it's coming from, a respected source. And of course, not just one source, two human rights bodies in the world, Amnesty International and of course Human Rights Watch, coming out to accuse the Amhara soldiers of ethnic cleansing in the war going on in the western part of Ethiopia, that's in Tigray, and of course the things that is going on in Ethiopia. Okay, they released a audio clip earlier this week, and the audio clip is about 5 minutes long. I would have loved to play everything so you understand what is going on, but because of the time that has been cut short on the show, let's just take some couple of clips from the some couple of minutes from the clip that was released by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, and of course we listen to the voice of a representative of the Human Rights Watch about the ethnic cleansing that is actually happening, or that Ethiopia has been accused of in the war going on in the western part of Ethiopia, the Tigrayan region precisely.
King 103.9 FM.
He kept telling us that we need to move, that we don't belong to stay here.
They took all my cutlass, burned my sorghum in the house, and told us this is not our region. They said our land is east of the Tekeze River.
They kept saying every night, we will kill you. Go out of the area.
The fighting followed years of growing tensions between the Ethiopian federal government, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and leaders of Tigray's ruling political party. Government forces. Initially, heavy fighting between the Ethiopian military with their allies against Tigrayan fighters took place around western Tigray. Electricity, banking, and telecommunications, including the internet and phone lines to Tigray, were cut off.
When the Ethiopian and Amhara forces entered the town, people were panicked and began running to the farms. They started killing people. No warning, just shooting. They shot at people running.
Soon, an interim
paper said Tigrayans need to leave the town immediately. They were thrown everywhere. So when we woke up in the morning, you should see it on your door or on the way to church.
Meanwhile, as reports of atrocities became widespread, Ethiopian authorities limited access to Western Tigray for international journalists and human rights and humanitarian groups. In Adi Goshu town, in January 2021, Amhara Special Forces and militias rounded up around 60 residents, transported them to the Tekeze Bridge, and shot them.
Okay, let's end it there for now. And of course, if time permits us, sometimes in the subsequent edition of the show, we try as much as possible to paint a better picture of, the ethnic cleansing that, of course, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch has actually accused the Ethiopian government of actually carrying out in the western region of Ethiopia, Tigray to be precise. Okay, let's listen to the voice excerpt of a representative of Human Rights Watch coming out to probably explain things and make it more understandable for us.
The decision is to ensure a free flow of humanitarian aid to Tigray region. To expedite aid delivery to people in need, is that the government is taking measures including increasing the number of UN humanitarian flights, and easing clearance procedures.
Sorry, I played the wrong clip. Okay, the right clip will come to your ears right now. I'm the representative of the Human Rights Watch.
We've conducted over 400 interviews with survivors and witnesses of the most harrowing abuses in Western Tigray zone over the last year. What we document are waves of abuses, starting with war crimes which were committed by the Ethiopian federal government forces alongside Amhara forces in the initial few weeks of the conflict in Tigray. And this targeted the Western Tigray zone at the time. And then what we started to see was basically Amhara regional forces and administration coming in, starting to administer the area, but in the process started what we would find to be this campaign of ethnic cleansing. So widespread abuses as part of that campaign, sexual violence, mass detention in the most
international detailing systematic ethnic cleansing in the Tigrayan region. Like I said earlier, the report titled "We Will Erase You from This Land" details incidents of arbitrary arrest, torture, rape, killings, and other war crimes resulting in hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans being displaced or leaving the region out of fear. In its response through the government communication service CGS, Ethiopia said the report covers sensitive political changes in the country, peace and security, and internal boundary matters, in addition to so-called findings on grave allegations of human rights abuses. A fortnight ago, like I said, Ethiopia actually put in place a temporary truce for aid to be sent to Tigray by humanitarian organizations. This was seen by the International Committee as a positive step towards solving the conflict. So the Ethiopian government has come out to say that they will take a careful look at the reports and probably will wait for developments from this particular news and see if the Ethiopian government would take decisive step to actually punish any offender if anyone is found wanting.
But also on the ongoing deportations, we document cases of federal government forces actually accompanying these buses where people were being forced away from their homes. Also in the detention facilities, especially in the early phases, federal government, military and also police were controlling some of these detention facilities. So the responsibility obviously lies both at the level of the regional government and amongst individuals, but also at the highest level as well.
Looking at Okay, moving forward quickly, still in the African continent, the recent spikes and the different developments of diseases and some couple of endemic viruses that has been happening across different African states and different countries. For example, on the cholera spike in Cameroon just some couple of weeks ago that killed about 29, and Ebola virus to a very large extent, and some couple of other non-communicable diseases that has reared its head in different African countries over the past couple of months have been blamed, by the WHO on climate change and some couple of other things that are happening in the world. But, my time is far spent already, or should I say my time has been cut short on the show. I would have loved to take an holistic, look into what this report about the world and the different diseases happening in Africa, being linked to climate change and all sorts. But before we leave the African continent, let's try as much as possible to give you statistics, regarding COVID-19 in the African continent. Okay, as of today, the 8th day in the month of April 2022, confirmed cases of COVID-19 from 55 African countries has actually reached 11,435,999, while it is said that over 273,178,717 vaccinations have been administered across the continent. Our reported deaths in Africa reached 252,199, and it is said that 9,619,252 people have recovered from the virus across the different 55 African countries. In case you don't know, South Africa still has the most reported cases with 3,728,689, and South Africa has actually recorded over a little bit over 100,000 deaths. Okay, precisely 100,075 deaths in the country. So once again, a brief lowdown from the 55 African countries. The total number of confirmed cases have reached 11,435,599. And talking about vaccination, we've had 273,118,717 vaccinations administered across the continent. And in terms of the deaths recorded in the 55 African countries, 255,199 deaths. And in terms of the people that have recovered, a total number of 9,619,252 people have recovered from the virus across the different African states. And this report is as of today, the 28th day in the month of April 2022. Moving forward quickly, leaving the African continent, let's go to other parts of the world and of course bring you the news that emerge from there. Okay, moving forward quickly, leaving the African continent, and where should I go to right now? South America. Okay, I've got news from North America, also got news from Europe, got news from the United States of America, the Middle East, and the war that is happening in Ukraine right now, the killings in Bucha. Let's see if time will permit me to take all this news that we've got from the outside of the African continent. Okay, in Hungary PM Prime Minister Orban actually wins fourth term with a comfortable victory. Here, official results from the Hungary's general election on Sunday showed nationalist Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban Fidesz party had won a fourth term in office by a much greater margin than pre-election polls as suggested after a campaign overshadowed by the war in neighboring Ukraine. Okay, so addressing a jubilant crowd, chanting his name, many of them said wearing Fidesz orange color, Orban said, "We have won a great victory, and a victory so great you can perhaps see it from the moon and certainly from Brussels." Okay, and the 58-year-old, already the longest serving head of government in the EU, was challenged by 6 united opposition parties seeking to roll back the illiberal revolution's Orban Fidesz party as pursued during the 12 consecutive years in office. But as at the time that this report was actually filed, with 94% of the votes counted, Fidesz party, that's talking about Viktor Orban's party, Fidesz, was on 43% compared to 35% for the opposition's coalition. And according to the results from the National Election Office, a result which means the party will retain its 2/3 majority in the parliament. Mr. Peter Makizé is 49, is the conservative leading the opposition list, addressing supporters and actually conceded defeat late on Sunday evening. So this particular election was actually viewed to be a tight contest between the incumbent Prime Minister Oban Victor and of course a leader of the opposition with 6 parties, forming coalition. The leader of the opposition is Peter Makize. He's 49-year-old, leading the opposition, and at the end of the day, with about 94% of the votes counted, the Fidesz party, that's the party of Victor Orban, the party of the incumbent Prime Minister, had already won 53% of the votes compared to 49% of the opposition party. And build on breaking it down to graphics and of course breaking it down to what has actually happened. Our Fidesz party garnered a total number of 53.1% of the votes. The coalition, that's the EM party, garnered 35% of the votes. Another party garnered 3.3% of the votes, while the other last party garnered 6.2% of the votes. And as it stands right now, Fidesz party, the party of the incumbent president, led with a total of 18.1% of the votes, maintained their 2/3 majority, and of course, Victor Orban returns as the prime minister of that country. Okay, a quick trip to Hungary right now, and we get to listen to the voice of the Victor Orban, and of course we get to listen to the voice of the leader of opposition, what they had to say concerning the election.
Dear friends, this victory may well be remembered till the end of our lives, because we had to face the toughest opponents yet. The left at home, the international left all around us, Brussels bureaucrats, all the organizations and money of the Soros Empire, the international mainstream media, and finally even the president of the Ukraine.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the voice of the victor, his name once again, Victor Orban, representing the Fidesz party, and eventually winning the election in Hungary. And of course, right now, the voice of Maki, the leader of the opposition party, actually challenging Mr. Orban.
We recognize Fidesz's victory. We recognize that in a system like this, whatever kind of election system there would be, whatever kind of election math there would be, Fidesz would have had a strong victory. They would have had a 2/3 victory.
Okay, Hungary was not the only one to hold the election earlier this week, and of course we also got results of election from Costa Rica. Right-wing former finance minister Rodrigo Chavez will take over as Costa Rica's new president on the 8th of May after winning Sunday's election, poised to oversee the challenge of reinvigorating the country's battered economy. Okay, as at the time of filing this report, with 96% of the votes counted, Chavez had a close to 6 percentage points lead in a provisional result over Figueres, the centrist former president, according to the Supreme Electoral Court. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rodrigo Chavez has been declared the winner of that particular election that held in Costa Rica, and it was, a tight contest between himself and Mr. Jose Maria Figueres. As it stands right now, Mr. Rodrigo Chavez, representing the PPSD party, garnered a total number of 1,018,454 votes, whereas Mr. Jose Maria Figueres garnered a total of 908,816 votes. The total number of percentage garnered by Mr. Rodrigo Chavez to win the election stands as 52.84%, whereas Mr. Jose Maria Figueres garnered a total number of 47.16% of the votes, and Mr. Jose Maria Figueres had actually conceded defeat to Mr. Rodrigo Chavez with just 96% of the vote being counted. But as it stands right now, 100% vote counts, and Mr. Rodrigo Chavez has already, been declared as the president-elect of Costa Rica. And of course, also in Serbia's leader Alexander Vučić claimed a landslide victory in the general elections on Sunday, paving way for another term as president, extending his decade-long rule in the Balkan nations. Okay, so breaking it down for you, Alexander Vučić also, in Serbia this time around, I talked about Hungary, and talked about Costa Rica, and this time around in Serbia, talking about the 2022 Serbian general election. Of course, Alexander Vučić, representing the SNS party, has done what is needed to actually emerge as the, winner of that particular election. Okay, because of my time that is fast spent, let's just leave, the news that emerged from there. Okay, as it stands right now, Alexander Vučić, garnered 58.54% of the votes. The popular vote standing at 2,216,526, while Mr. Dragov Ponos, who happens to be, the second person that comes close, garnered a total number of 697,417 votes. That totals 18.42% of the votes. What a very wide margin. Okay, winning with 58.54% of the votes and coming second with 18.42% of the votes. I guess the masses have spoken. Okay, let me round up with this piece of news from the North American, precisely in the United States of America. The United States Senate actually confirms the first black woman to Supreme Court, her name, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Okay, the United States made history on Thursday as the Senate confirmed Ketanji Brown Jackson as the first black woman to ever serve on the Supreme Court. The 51-year-old, Mrs. Ketanji Brown Jackson is 51 years old. The appointment means that white men will not be the majority on the nation's high courts for the very first time in 233 years. And President Joe Biden actually called it a historic moment for the United States. Okay, let's take a quick trip to the United States of America. I will round up with the voice of the election or the votes that actually took place in the United States Senate to announce Mrs. Ketanji Brown Jackson as the first black woman to be in the Supreme Court. My name is Ajibola Samuel, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful weekend ahead of you. Jamaat Mubarak, and of course Ramadan Kareem to all Muslimah and Muslim faithfuls out there. Have a wonderful weekend ahead of you once again. My name is Ajibola Samuel. Join me again same time for another exciting edition of the show. And stay safe. Au revoir.
On this vote, the yeas are 53, the nays are 47, and this nomination is confirmed.
King 103.9 FM Ọba Radio. King 103.9 FM Ọba Radio.
Alhamdulillah al-wahid al-ahad al-fardu as-samad alladhi lam yalid